All right, I guess we're ready. So thanks everybody for coming out. Hope you're having a good show here at VMworld. My name is Kyle Gleed. I'm on the technical marketing team at VMware, and I work very closely with the vSphere platform to include installation, upgrades, deployments, auto deploys, things like that. And with me is Josh Gray, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Thanks, Kyle. My name is Josh Gray. I work in the Global Center of Excellence as a solutions engineer. But before that, I worked 5 years in the support organization, and that's where my experience comes from with this topic.
All right. So with that, we're going to jump in. So this is a part 2. This is vSphere Upgrade Series part 2. So a show of hands, how many of you guys attended the part 1?
Whoa.
Okay, looks like most of you. If you missed it by chance, it's VC 5690.
Something.
I think it's 5690. I looked it up and I just had a brain freeze. It was repeated. It was Monday and Tuesday, so it's too late to go back and get the part 1 if you missed it, but you will have availability. It was recorded. You will be able to go out and get the recording. So this is part 2. So what are we going to talk about in part 2? Well, as the slides show, we're going to be talking about upgrading the vSphere host and the virtual machines. And so kind of part 1 focused on vCenter, and we're going to take it from vCenter on and talk about the rest of the upgrade experience. So here's our agenda. We're just going to go through a quick overview, talk a little bit about how software's just distributed, packaged and distributed. We'll get into a little bit of discussion comparing patches versus updates versus upgrades. And then I'm going to hand it off to Josh, who's going to take us into the upgrades, take us through an ESXi upgrade. Then we'll talk about upgrading virtual machines and other post-upgrade considerations, VMFS versions and things like that. So before I get in, I just want to get a quick understanding of how many people are out there are running ESX, the classic ESX with a service console. Okay, there's still a few out there. How many people are still running 4.x, so either 4.0 or 4.1? Okay. How many people are running 5.1? All right, so that's probably the majority, and 5.0, 5.1. Okay, that gives us a good idea. So I think we got a good kind of cross-section of all the different flavors, all the different versions. So I think we're in good shape. So let's start with a quick overview. So, with each section, we kind of have a tip on the slide, and we're going to kind of use these tips to kind of help guide us through. So what's the main takeaway from each section? And that's kind of the tip. So upgrade overview. So understanding the upgrade process is a critical part of the upgrade. So, upgrading vSphere is a multi-stage process. It starts with vCenter, and that was the part 1. And vCenter is usually the heavy lifting, right? Because there's a lot of things in vCenter. With 5.5, we now have the SSO, we have the web client, we have inventory servers, we have vCenter. So we broke this out into different components, different modules. Some of us run those together, some of us run those separate. So there's a lot of consideration that goes into that. Am I going to have a local database, a remote database? Am I going to use the appliance? And depending on how I answer those questions, my upgrade experience is going to vary a little bit. Once you get done upgrading vCenter, where you go from there kind of depends. What plugins are you using? Are you using Update Manager? Are you using VCD? Are you using View? Are you using any other components? When do those have to be upgraded? Are they compatible? And so that step 2 is kind of those plugins. And in the example here, I got Update Manager kind of, but you can replace whatever your plugin might be. And then you get into ESXi, and then you're not done when you upgrade ESXi. You have virtual machines. Those virtual machines are running versions of VMware tools. They're running a virtual hardware version. There's upgrades involved there. And then after you upgrade those, at the same time, you have things like VMFS volume. If you're coming from a 4 environment, you're going to be coming forward with some VMFS 3 volumes. If you're in a 5 environment and you were upgraded from 4, maybe you're still running VMFS 3 and you have questions about how to upgrade those. So you got to take that into account. If you're running virtual distributed switches, those have a version tied to them as well. There's an upgrade process there as well. So that's kind of the overview of the process. And kind of the thing to keep in mind here, and we want to start out with this because, you always need to start with vCenter. So almost everybody's running vCenter. Yes, you can run ESXi without it, but that's, we're assuming you're going to be running vCenter. You always want to start with vCenter. You need to do that first. So the order is important. Don't forget about your plugins. I've talked to a lot of customers who upgrade, and then they find out after the upgrade that they have a plugin that breaks. Then they're scrambling to fix that plugin. So make sure you plan it out, you take those things into consideration. vCenters, how many vCenters do you have? Most of us 1, many of us 2, 3, some of us maybe have more. How many hosts do you have? Well, hosts is a different story. You start getting into the tens, the hundreds, the thousands of hosts. So obviously when it comes to upgrading vCenter, it's something you're going to do a little less often, but when you get to hosts, you're going to have a lot more of those to do. So we're going to talk about rolling upgrades, and how do you go through and upgrade hundreds of hosts? How do I upgrade a cluster with 32 hosts? Obviously I can't do that at one time, so can I mix versions of ESX and ESXi? What versions? What are the considerations? So we'll cover that. So that's kind of the overview. And so it's very important that you make sure that you plan this thing out before you start. So don't start your vCenter upgrade. Don't start step 1 until you have thought through step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. So that's kind of the main takeaway from this slide. Before you do an upgrade, there's a few things you need to be able to, you spend some time. You know, there's some homework that's involved here. It's very easy to go in, boot an ESXi host, and upgrade an ESXi host. That's a no-brainer. You boot it up, I think maybe 3-4 clicks, reboot, and you're done. Okay. So it's very easy to be tempted to jump into the upgrade without really thinking about things. So we do have the documentation online, so you can go online. There's an upgrade guide. That upgrade guide is very good. It covers ESX to ESXi migration as well as ESXi upgrades. It will tell you what configuration gets carried forward. There's a lot of good information in there. Compatibility guide. Don't assume that just because your host ran fine with 5.1 that it's going to run fine with 5.5. Drivers change. Firmware levels change. New versions require revs of those things. So make sure you do your due diligence. Make sure you spend some time and go through. Make sure your hardware, your HBAs, your NICs are on the compatibility guide. And then the interoperability matrix. Go in and make sure that your versions are interoperable. And where this can really come in handy is, you know, we're going to get to it in the slides, but a lot of people have questions about what version of VMware tools is supported with ESXi 5.5? Do I have to reboot my VMs? Do I have to take a VM outage when I do the upgrade? Can I continue to run my VM? What about virtual hardware? You can go to the interoperability matrix and you can basically put in the number, the versions, and it will tell you that compatibility. And we're going to get in a lot more detail as we go through. Okay, so what is an upgrade? What are we doing when we upgrade a vSphere host? We're essentially taking a running host, and we're basically applying new binaries on that host, retaining the configuration. So when we do that, it helps to kind of have a good understanding of how VMware likes to package, well, not really how we like to, but how we do package our software, how we distribute our software, and how we make that available to you. And then knowing that's also going to help you understand what are your options in terms of, you know, should I use the image that HP provides or Dell provides, or should I use the image that VMware provides? What's the difference? Is the software I get from a third-party vendor the same software I get from VMware? So let's cover that before we get into any much detail on the actual upgrade. So with ESXi, software is packaged into what we call VIBs, vSphere Installation Bundle. The best way I can describe this, if you're a Unix person, think of a tarball. If you're a Windows person, just think of a zip archive. So a VIB is just a packaging format that we use to distribute software. So all the ESXi software, all the drivers, all the add-on components are packaged as VIBs. Those VIBs are then put together and made available for you to download. You can download them as an ISO, as an offline bundle, or as an online depot. Those are just 3 different methods for distributing the software. Here on the screen I have a screenshot of where you go to the download site. You'll see the ISO and the zip file. And there are different use cases for using those, and we're going to talk about that. And then the last thing you'll want to keep in mind is this concept of an image profile. And this is something a lot of people aren't really familiar with. If you download the ISO and use the ISO, you don't really get exposed to the concept of an image profile. But if you're using something like auto-deploy, or if you're using the image builder and you're creating your own custom images, then the idea of an image profile is something that's very important. When you download patches, as I'm sure we've all downloaded them, you'll notice, and this is a screenshot showing it, it's probably a little hard to see in the back, but you'll notice we always have 2 default image profiles that we always provide. One's called standard and one's called no tools. And that's exactly what you would think it is. Standard is everything. It's all the VIBs. And no tools is minus the VMware tools. So why do we provide the 2? What's the difference between the 2? We'll talk a little bit about that coming up as well. So that's how software is distributed. So it really requires, you know, we understand the concept of a VIB. We understand whether I'm going to be working with an ISO image, or I'm going to work with an offline depot, or an online depot, or an offline bundle, and what image profile am I going to use to upgrade my host. Okay, so Double clicking on each of these, getting into a little bit more detail. So I mentioned a VIB is essentially just the way we package. So a VIB is really a payload. So if I have a driver and that driver is going to install 5 or 6 files, some of those files will go in ETSI, some files might go in opt, whatever. But I'm going to take those files and I'm going to put them in a what we call a payload. And then I'm going to have an XML file that describes that payload. Does this require a reboot when I install? Does it conflict with any other packages? Does it require any other packages? What are the dependencies, what are the requirements for this package when you install it on the host? That's captured in that XML descriptor file. We then take and we digitally sign that with a digital signature. And that digital signature tells us a couple of things. And one of the things it tells us is the acceptance level. The acceptance level basically tells us who wrote the software, who supports the software. So there's 4 acceptance levels. There's VMware certified, VMware supported, partner supported, and community supported. And essentially what these mean is if it's VMware certified, VMware wrote it, VMware tested it, VMware supports it. If it's VMware supported, it may be something that a vendor wrote, maybe something that IBM or AMD or one of our partners wrote, and VMware is taken in-house and we've tested it and we support it. If it's partner supported, that might be something like a power path or some type of multipathing or some type of storage plugin that you're running from a third-party vendor. Okay. In a nutshell, as long as it's partner supported or above, it's digitally signed and it's supported. So when I say the vendor is going to support it, that doesn't mean you call VMware support. We're going to tell you to call the partner. What that means is you're running in a supported configuration. If we have any issues with that package, our support is going to work with the vendor to get that resolved with you. We're not going to, hand you off to the vendor. But it just tells you, you should always be running your software partner supported and above. And every VIB is going to have that digital signature, and you want to pay attention to that. Community supported is kind of a little bit different. You have the ability, everybody here has the ability to go out and write their own VIBs. And when you have a VIB that you wrote, it's not digitally signed. That digital signature is zeroed out. So this would be like going out, downloading a script on the web, putting it on my Linux box, and just running it. It's a use at your own risk. And we and in order to install software on the box that is not signed, you have to reduce your acceptance level down to community supported. So you want to avoid using those. If you use them, you want to pay attention to what they're doing. And, that capability is there. But for the most part, you want to pay attention to the software you're installing on the host. You want to pay attention to the acceptance level. You are able to log on to the host and view and manage the VIBs using the ESXi command. And there's a couple of examples there. So really I just want to show you that, VIBs are how we package software. When you look at your host, it's a collection of VIBs that have been installed on your host. You have the ability to go in, run ESXi commands, and query that software and understand, what VIBs are installed. And those VIBs, they're tamper resistant. They're digitally signed. So whether you get them from VMware or you get them from third party, you know that's the software that you're supposed to have. Because if anybody tampers with it, it's going to invalidate that digital signature. So that's a little bit about VIBs. And as I mentioned, VIBs are then packaged up and made available. Now, if you download the ISO, you kind of get a static collection of VIBs with a static image profile that you can then consume right away. I can import that into VUM. I can create an upgrade baseline. I can scan and remediate, and I can use that to upgrade my host. I can boot up on the ISO, and I can basically go through the installer, couple clicks, and install. Another option you can do is you can download the zip file. And that's a collection of VIBs as well. Then you can use the image builder CLI, which is basically a plugin to Power CLI, and you can go in and create your own custom images. So I can go in and say, hey, here's the software from VMware, here's the software from this vendor, here's the software from this vendor. Now let me go in and merge all these together and create a custom image so that when I install my host, it has everything I need. I don't have to then install from VMware, then run another install to install this. I can basically create my own custom image. If I don't want to download these offline depots, I can go out and access these online repositories, which are just available through the web. So most vendors will provide online repositories as well. Doesn't really matter where you get the software. If you want to use the ISO, use it. If you want to use auto-deploy, you're going to have to use some of the offline bundles. So there's different use cases, different requirements. VMware provides these, and our third-party vendors provide these as well. So when the third-party vendors, the one you get from the third-party vendors, what they're doing is they're taking the software from VMware, And they're going in and they're packaging it with their own software, and then they're providing that to you. So basically what they're doing is instead of requiring you to use the image builder to create your custom image, they're going to do that for you. So how many of you guys have had the question, should I use the package from VMware or should I use the package from a vendor? There's a few of you out there. I get that question a lot. My answer to you is, if your vendor is providing you a package, use it. It's the same software. Remember, we got those digital signatures. So it's not the benefit is if HP or Dell or Cisco or whoever, IBM or whoever is providing an image that they've tested and they've added custom drivers that have components that help manage their hardware, it's in your best interest to use that, and they've already done the legwork for you, so use their image. Now, that said, if I've installed my host with an image from HP or Dell and suddenly VMware comes out with a patch, do I need to go to HP or Dell or whoever to get that patch? Not necessarily. I can use the VMware patch and apply it because the patch is going to patch VIBs that VMware provides. So just kind of hope that helps understand kind of, the different formats that you can download the software in, why they're there, and, feel free, if your vendor provides that image, use it. The only downside to that is there could be some lag. If we come out with an update on the first, the vendor might need a couple of weeks to basically take that in before they can provide the update through their channels. So you might see some lag time there. But other than that, there's really no disadvantages, and I would definitely encourage you to go out and use those if they're available to you. Okay, so getting back to the image profile. So again, this is something that maybe a lot of us aren't as familiar with, and it's important in the context of upgrades because if I'm running 5.0, I can use the ESXi command to upgrade my host. That's an option for doing upgrades. And I do that using this ESXi software profile update command. And I basically point it to the depot. And again, that depot is that zip file that I've downloaded. And I point it to the profile. And that profile is going to be, for example, the default stateless or stateless cache. Standard or no tools. So the image profile is basically the image that's going to get installed in the host. If you have the ISO, it's basically the standard image profile. You can create your own image profiles. If you have a set of servers and different vendors, you can create different profiles for different vendors, different profiles that include different VIBs. And then you can, when you install, upgrade, you can then use those profiles. So just keep that in mind. One other comment about the image profile is similar to the VIBs. The image profile also has an acceptance level. And so you define that acceptance level at the image profile, and what that says is I'm not going to allow you to add any VIBs to this image profile that don't match my acceptance level. So for almost all of us, the acceptance level is going to be partner supported because almost all of us are going to have drivers and things that come from partners. So the thing to watch here is make sure your image profiles you create are at least partner supported or above, and that way you know all the VIBs are digitally signed and you know that they're protected. So a couple examples there on using that command. So that is a little bit of information about how we package, how we distribute software, and the kind of when you're upgrading from the command line, where that image profile comes in. So now, before we actually get into the ESXi upgrade, I want to just take a quick minute and talk about patches versus updates versus upgrades. Okay, so because I get a lot of questions around this area, and probably one of the most common questions I get is, are patches cumulative? And I'm going to talk about that. Okay, so what kind of patches can you expect? This is more of probably a review. I'm sure most of this is probably information you already know. But we have hot patches. These are basically, you call support, you have a one-off situation that's unique to you and your environment. Support has a workaround, they'll give it to you as a patch. This is a patch that will give to you, but it's not something available to the general mass. So it's a specific fix for a specific customer. It's controlled through GSS. You call support, if you hit it, they'll give you the fix. Then there are express patches. Similar to the hot patches, these are things that kind of come up and we discover. But these are things that are going to affect a lot of customers, and we need mass distribution. So express patches, they're unscheduled, they're high priority fixes, and they just come out whenever we find a critical bug that needs to be fixed right away. Aside from that, we typically release patches on a 3-month interval. So about every 3 months. If you go out to the patch portal and you query all the 5.0 patches or all the 5.1 patches, you'll notice a little trend. About every 3 months, you see a patch come out. Okay, that's not set in stone. It's loosely defined. But it's just kind of a ballpark, of kind of the way we go. So, and typically those scheduled patches, they're going to focus on more higher priority things, issues that need to be fixed, things that we've discovered. And then the last kind of update is the update release. So update 1, update 2. And that's really kind of a rolling update. And that will include all the patches and updates from the, prior, from the GA or the prior update. And now just basically rolls everything up and includes that. And those are typically released usually 6 months after the initial release. We'll have our first update. And then about 9 months after that. So kind of a 6-9-9 schedule. So that's just a little bit about the patches and the types of patches you can see and how often you can expect those to come out. Okay, now when we release a patch, one of the first questions you have is, okay, how do I determine if I need to install this patch? So patches are typically broke down into different types of fixes. There's bug fixes and there's security fixes. And then you can go in with each of those patches. There's a KB article, and you can click on that KB article, and it will list all the bug fixes. And you can go down and you can actually see, and here's an example of a text from one of our 5.1 patches, I believe. And basically some text telling you what that fix is. So you do need to kind of download these, evaluate these, determine your risk, prioritize your installation. A little bit of advice about patches, some general rules. Security fixes, you're going to want to install those right away. Those are typically addressing security vulnerabilities, and nobody wants to run their vSphere infrastructure at risk. And if the bad guys know about the security vulnerabilities, they're going to be targeting those, so you're going to want to patch those as soon as you can. When you look at the patches, you'll see patches are typically grouped as either BG for bug fixes or SG for security fixes. And remember the image profile we talked about? When we release patches, you're typically going to see 4 image profiles. You're going to have a standard image that's all the fixes, a standard image profile that's just the security fixes. And then you'll have the same thing for the without the tools. So you'll have the standard and no tools. But the reason why we have the one with just the security fixes as opposed to the one with all the fixes is because a lot of times customers will want to install all the security fixes, but if I'm not using iSCSI, I may not install a fix to fix an iSCSI driver. So kind of a little bit more information there. So always apply those security fixes as soon as you can. Put a plan in place to stay current on patches. So even if you don't have a plan today that says we're going to patch these boxes every 6 months or every 4 months, or I've talked to my boss and he knows that here in a few months I'm going to need to schedule some time to take some boxes, some hosts out of the DRS cluster and patch those. Put that plan in place. Have that plan ready. If the time comes and you don't need to patch, fine. But at least you've got that scheduled. You've got that on the plan. And stay current. I talked to a lot of customers today who are running like 4.1 GA and never patched. 5.0 never patched. And those just, that's just, to me, that's a customer who's just waiting for a support call. And they're going to call support and they're going to find out, that was fixed. And I could have avoided this whole issue and this whole downtime situation if I would have just taken time to patch. So stay current. A quick example on a patch. So here's, hopefully you can see that, but here's a patch from 5.1. This is from December 2012. You'll see that KB article down there, and in addition, the patch will tell you whether or not it needs to reboot. If I click on that KB, here we see a list of the bulletin IDs, and these are basically the fixes. You'll see the -BG for bug fix and the -SG, and for each of those fixes, I have another KB article. I can click on that, and it will basically tell me what VIB is being updated, and a list of all the PRs that are fixed. I can scroll down to the patch and I can actually see a description of what those fixes are. So that's just a little quick overview on how you can basically go from a patch to, does this patch affect me? Do I need to install this? So you basically start out at the patch, you go out, you see a list of the fixes, and then you can see those categorized by bug or security. You can then go in and you can follow that KB article down to what VIBs are being updated, and then you can get that down into what are the actual updates. So I can identify if it's an iSCSI fix or if it's a fiber channel fix, and does it apply to me. How do I get notified of patches? If you're not getting notification of new patches, go out to my VMware, go under subscription, and make sure you're subscribed. You want to get those notifications. You want to get those patches in and do that analysis and determine whether or not you need to install this patch, and you want to do that quickly. So do sign up. That notification is available through the my VMware subscriptions. Okay. One last thing before I hand it off to Josh for the upgrades. Are patches cumulative? Okay, so I've tried to answer this on a couple of blogs, and it actually got a little bit confusing. So I want to take a minute and just kind of explain where the confusion comes in. So here's an actual patch from December 2012 for ESXi 5.1. And this patch updated two VIBs, the ESX base VIB and the VMware tools VIB, or the tools-lite. So there's two fixes on this patch. A little while later, in May, March, we released another patch. And this patch only updated the ESX base VIB. So as you can see, the patch in March does not include the fix for the tools. The new driver or the driver update or whatever that was in tools is not included. However, the ESX base VIB, the fix that was in the December patch, is included in the March patch. Obviously, not doing that would cause some regression. So from a VIB perspective, they are cumulative. If I have a VIB updated in subsequent patches, that update is going to include all the prior fixes. But not all patches are going to include all VIBs. So in that sense, the patches are not cumulative. So it's really important to understand. That's why I took the time to go through and talk about what is a VIB and how are VIBs used, because when you go to patching, you're looking at VIBs and you're looking at what VIBs are updated. And an upgrade is essentially just upgrading a whole bunch of VIBs at one time. So just keep that in mind. So here we have the ES base is included in the earlier update, so the fixes, the EX base does include the fixes from December as well as March, but the tools are not included in the March. So I would need to install both those patches, so in that sense they're not cumulative. And then when the update comes out, that update's a roll-up patch, and it will include all those patches. Okay, so that wraps it up for me. I'm going to hand it off to Josh here, and he's actually going to take us through the actual upgrade.
Thanks, Kyle. It's really great we're going into VIBs so deeply in a setting like this so that customers can understand that before they get on an actual support call, which is usually when it happens. So next we're going to talk about vSphere hosts and how we actually apply these updates, how we actually do them, right? So one of the topics that comes up is when to do the upgrade, when to do the fresh install. That applies to the hosts as well as most of you were in the vCenter session earlier this week. And our answer for hosts is a little bit different than it would be for vCenter. So you would do the upgrade when you have a lot of hosts, because there's a lot of administrative time to do the fresh install over and over and over again, right, for your entire environment. Factors to consider if you're doing the upgrade: you can totally take advantage of DRS, vMotion, storage vMotion if you need to, and we'll talk about how that can help you, go through that in something called a rolling upgrade with a nice little animation. What you do the fresh install, really, if you only have a small number of hosts, you want to test out one new software package on just one host, see all this fancy new stuff in 5.5, what that's like. Just do it from the command line, done, boom, fresh install, right? So a lot of hosts versus not a lot of hosts, pretty intuitive, I think, but it's good to know that's what we're recommending, really. So hardware incompatibility, Kyle really went through that pretty deeply, but when I give these talks, I like to bring up a screenshot of the hardware compatibility guide and actually show how, that blade you had that was working fine for a number of years suddenly fell off the compatibility list when we released this new version, and you need to be aware of that. You can't just blindly think, it worked fine. It's going to work fine in the future, right? Always remember you need to look at that to see what's in your environment and if it's still going to be supported. Similarly, on the software side, you need to pay attention to all your solutions. If you're using Vue, VCD, VCNS, VUM, all these different software products that use vCenter, ESX, you need to see where the compatibility is. We've had problems in the past where maybe versions were named the same thing and you had something called vSphere 5.1 and maybe you had Vue 5.1 and you might have had some problems at GA time there. Raise your hand. Anybody have that? Oh, no one in here? All right. So always remember you need to check that out as well. And the release notes. As an ex-support person, I can't stress that enough. We've closed a ton of cases over and over with just pointing someone to a section of the release notes saying, we tried to warn you of this. Read those when the software comes out. It'll denote everything that's new in a very bullet point section, new OSs that we support, new databases, let's say, read those. It's very important. And again, always upgrade vCenter and the vCenter components first. They can manage old hosts. That's an important concept. So vCenter 5.5 can go back all the way to 4x, right? Very important. So how can I do the install? What are my actual options there? So these are the 4 things that I'll talk about pretty briefly. ESXi installer, VUM, and vSphere Update Manager, ESXi, and a scripted method of doing it, right? All 4 options for you to do, all it really changes between them are how you do the upgrade, not necessarily what comes out the other side. What comes out is going to be the same through all 4 of those. An important concept on this section here. So with the installer, it's exactly what you would think. You pop in the ISO into the actual hosts, or maybe in an ILO DRAC, you mount the ISO remotely, run the installer, do the upgrade, done, right? A lot of overhead there, you're doing that manually. So if, let's say you're doing the fresh install, or when I was comparing upgrade to fresh install, a lot of manual work here. This is what I'm referring to. But let's say, who uses Update Manager? Let's do that real quick. I'm sure the majority, right? That's what most people are going to use. You can import the ISO, create your baseline, right-click, do the stage, remediate, do a whole cluster at once maybe, or do them one by one, done. That's what most of you are going to do. But you also can do ESXi, which Kyle kind of alluded to, with the system and profile namespace there. You can do that as well. It'll fire off the process, get it rebooted, you're good to go. You can also do a scripted install. Not many people do that, I don't think, unless you have a specific need to do that, to do an answer file to get specific things done quickly, maybe. Script it, done. VUM, probably going to be what you do. So we were going to take this out, but we wanted to mention it real briefly. Auto deploy. How does upgrades apply to auto deploy? We mentioned this in the documentation, so it bears weight to bring up in a situation like this. You don't necessarily are doing an upgrade when you're using auto deploy. You're switching the image in the auto deploy server, update the cache, reboot it, then you're on the new version. You're not actually doing a full upgrade there, right? And don't think of it as, oh, I can take an already existing host, use auto deploy in some way, and have an upgraded host come out of the other side. That's not what's going on there. So it's pixie booting, right? So it's just using a new image. So consider that my host is kind of upgraded because it's on the new version, right? I'll just go through there. So this is a great concept that we're supporting in 5.5. Who has the 4.0 hosts? Who was that? Good number of people. Luckily, with this version, you do not have to do a stair-step upgrade. We'll support everything from 4.0 newer. That's great. If you're on 3.5, you will have to do an upgrade, definitely. But 4.0, 4.1, 5.0, 5.1, you can go directly to 5.5. No break. This is kind of an older idea, an older concept, but it bears weight in this conversation as well. When you do the upgrade from an older version, you may get this kind of sometimes scary warning that your VIBs will be removed on the upgrade. This was really only when upgrading from 4x. I believe now we're patching the VIBs around the existing VIBs. We're not getting rid of those. But if you're in this situation and you get this warning, you have a couple options that you need to do. You need to reinstall the VIB after the upgrade, or add the VIB manually to the image profile, or use your vendor supplied image, which Kyle was referring to before. So if it warns you your VIBs are going away, you'll probably need those back in some form. Clusters. So rolling upgrades are supported and recommended. It's a great idea because we can have mixed clusters of versions, right? You can do your 4x hosts one at a time at the same maintenance window over a couple weeks, a month. I guess I wouldn't recommend a month being an X support guy, but you can do that, right? Use HA, vMotion, maybe even storage vMotion if you need to avoid downtime. It's a great concept. And let's kind of visually get that across. So let's say I've already upgraded vCenter 5.5, the little blade server right there, and I have a cluster of 4.1 hosts. If I evacuate the first host there, I move all those workloads off to some of the others, do the upgrade. For some reason, the host gets bigger when it does the upgrade visually there?
Well, that's because the support maximums have doubled in 5.5, so
right.
the host gets a lot bigger. So work with me here.
What did they say in the keynote? 2x, right? So I guess it's 2x bigger, right? So 5.5, life is good, upgrade went smooth. And then I start evacuating the next host, right? Move the workloads off again, do the upgrade, gets bigger, and so on. So again, you could do this over the course of a time period, but I don't know if I would fully recommend doing that long term. You would want to do that in a pretty quick window. And again, no downtime, right? That's a great concept we have. Rolling upgrades. So, yeah, mixed clusters, that's the main concept here. And then we're going into the next topic of hardware, right? Actually not, we're talking about partitioning. So this is a simplified way of describing partitioning because when you went from ESX Classic to ESXi, a lot happened under the hood. A lot happened to the file structure for the ESXi system to be created at the end of that. But now, if you're starting with ESXi hosts, it's a very less intrusive, less things changing under the hood. All we're doing is we're patching those VIB files, right? We're not what am I trying?
We're not repartitioning the disk. So essentially, when you upgrade from like ESX to ESXi, like when you went from 4.x or whatever to 5.0 and you made that transition, you went from a Linux partitioning type structure to an ESXi, and there's some repartitioning going on. From 4.0 and beyond, when you upgrade ESXi, there's no repartitioning of the disk. There's the same 5 partitions that exist. You have that first gig of the disk is always divided in those 5 partitions. And if you have a disk that's bigger than that, if you have enough space, we'll create a scratch partition and VMFS volume on that. But the first gig is all that's required. You need 1 gig to install. And when we do the upgrade, as the animation is going to show, there's not a lot going on under the covers. This kind of ties in with should I do a fresh install versus an upgrade. The end result is the same. We're basically going to go in and have the 5.5 VIBs with our configuration. It's just how you get there. So the animation he's going to go through is going to actually take us through how to save the configuration, how to overlay the binaries, reboot the host, and restore the configuration.
Right. Thanks, Scott. So what he's talking about when he's saving the config file, that under the covers we're calling that the state.tgz file. So we take that when the upgrade gets started and we place it aside. We're replacing all those VIB files so you get all the new stuffs. He does the reboot, and the configuration is reapplied. Right? Nice, simple, not a lot happens, just replacing those VIB files, and the configuration is restored. So virtual machine upgrades, right? So we're talking about the hosts. Now, the next step in your upgrade process is the virtual machines. So there's 2 virtual. So with virtual machines, there's a concept of virtual machine hardware and the compatibility level. So in 5.1, this happened in 5.1, not 5.5, that we started changing how we referred to that in the GUI to make it a little easier for you. Because when I saw all my virtual machines, if they're at hardware version 4, I don't really know what that means, just on the face of it. Version 7, version 8. When I see that, I think, oh, I just need to do that because I need to do the upgrade because a higher number is better, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it's better. You get more capability when you do that, right? So we're changing how that's referred to make it obvious that it's more a compatibility issue. So 5.0 will support 8 and newer, 4x will support 7, and so on. So 5.1, you do the upgrade, you get a new version of tools, you get the new version of hardware, call that version 9. And I don't know what the circle is.
So basically, he's just showing here how when you upgrade from one version to the next, the VMware tools is backwards compatible. So meaning that in 5.0 we extended our support matrix and we formally documented the fact that the newer version of tools is supported on the older host. In addition, the older version of tools is supported on the newer host. So on the tools, I can run anywhere from 4x, 4.0, 4.1, 5.0, 5.1 on a 5.1 host. Virtual hardware, we support all the way back to hardware version 4. And as he kind of mentioned, we moved in the web client away from calling it virtual hardware to calling it VM compatibility. So when you go to the web client, how many people are using the web client today?
Please.
Okay, so hopefully we'll see a lot more hands. If you're not using it, definitely encourage you to install it and start playing with it and get familiar with it. That is the direction. That is where we're going. My understanding is that the C# client will not be in the next release, but we said that before, so take that with a grain of salt. But so when you move to the web client, suddenly we stop calling it virtual hardware. We start calling it VM compatibility. Okay, we did that change for 2 reasons. If you look at the slide here, and go ahead and click the fill the animation. So if you look at the slide here, we have virtual hardware 4, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So for us who have been around for a while, who've been working with vSphere for a while, we know these make sense. But to a new guy, he's going to say, well, where's 5 and 6? And when did 4 come out? Did that come out with 3.02, 3.5? They don't know. The 4 actually came out in 3.5. That 5 and 6 were VMware Tool Workstation Fusion releases, never made it to ESXi. 7 came out in 4.0. 8 came out in 5.0. 9 came out in 5.1. So you have this kind of arbitrary number that doesn't really mean anything to you. And then all you know is you're looking at the number and saying, wow, 4 is a small number and you're on 10. I'm really out of date. So there's this latent pressure to continually upgrade.
Right.
So to get away from that and to stop chasing this version number and to help, put some meaning behind what it means, we simply renamed it from virtual hardware version to compatibility. So to help with the transition, you will see a lot of places that will have VM compatibility 5.5 with parentheses virtual hardware, and you'll see kind of to help this. But going forward, when you look at a virtual machine in the web UI and you see that it's compatible with 5, say it's compatible with 4.x and later, you know that virtual machine's capabilities are tied to that 4.x release. So if I have 8 vCPUs and I need 12, I know that 5.0 is when we jump that limit up, so I need to upgrade my virtual hardware. Otherwise, I'm fine.
Right, so you would only want to do that when you need that new capability.
Yeah, and
you don't necessarily have to always do it.
Yeah,
right.
And this is tying in with the fact that when it comes to upgrading a virtual machine, both in tools and hardware, is optional. And this support matrix is showing you why it's optional. Right. You can continue to run the older versions in a supported configuration on the newer host. And that's kind of the big takeaway from here.
Right. So then tools, the concept's a little bit different. We highly recommend you keeping tools at the newest level. You'll have better, performance, so one of the things tools does is operate the mouse, keyboard, screen, right? So you always want to have tools upgraded, in my opinion. Tools are definitely backward compatible. That helps with the mixed clustering. So VMware, the tools 4x would be compatible with 4.0 and on. Tools 5x compatible with 4x on, right? Backward compatible. That's the key concept there. But with the virtual machine compatibility, the hardware that we were talking about just now is a little bit different. So you would only want to do that when you have to, or you want to, right? You want all that new functionality. But it's not backward compatible. So this is a situation where you can paint yourself into the corner when you start doing your upgrades. You get halfway through your cluster and somebody, maybe your intern on the side started upgrading the hardware compatibility. Now you can't, vMotion, you can't evacuate that host back to some of the older hosts because it's not compatible anymore. So that's a concept that when we put up that continuum of all the steps in the upgrade process, that's why the VMs are their own arrow after the hosts. So do all the hosts first, and then consider when you need to do tools and virtual machine compatibility. So post-upgrade,
okay, yeah, so how many of you guys are still running VMFS 3 in your environment today? Okay, so so really what this is about is, so we've gone through and we've taken you through the process of, okay, you got to upgrade vCenter first, I got that, okay, now I need to upgrade my host, and you told me all this information about how software is packaged and distributed, so I know kind of how to upgrade my host, I got lots of options, I do it. And then once I'm done, I'm not, a lot of people stop, okay, I've upgraded vCenter, upgraded my host, Okay, but now I've got VMware Tools, I got virtual hardware, and we just talked about that. Tools, you always want to upgrade, as Josh mentioned. There's a lot of great things in tools that help everything from memory management to heart beating with the HA. It's not just about making the mouse easy to move around. Tools is very essential. And so you should upgrade tools right away as soon as you can. And you upgrade tools, you don't have to worry about it when you're in that mixed cluster. I got a 32-host cluster, and half of them are running 4.0 and half of them are running 5.5. You don't have to worry about incompatibilities because those versions of tools are supported across the board. The older versions are supported on the newer hosts, the newer versions are supported on the older hosts. We do that intentionally because we want to facilitate that rolling upgrade. Virtual hardware, on the other hand, doesn't work that way. With virtual hardware, once you upgrade it, you can't go back. Okay, so those are just some post-upgrade considerations. And tied in with that, VMFS. So similar to the virtual hardware, VMFS volumes, you can upgrade, I just said the word similar, I don't want to confuse you. So virtual hardware, VMware Tools requires a reboot to upgrade. So there's a hit there. VMFS volumes, you can upgrade on the fly while you're running VMs. It's very transparent. So, but it's something you want to keep in mind. And if I'm running VMFS 3 and I've upgraded, I'm on VMFS 5, I want to upgrade my volumes, okay? So the thing to keep in mind is you can do this. It's done very quickly with no downtime, non-disruptive. It's just a metadata change. So here's an example where you can go into the web UI, you see that upgrade to VMFS 5, you click that button, and you're done. Okay. It's really that easy. However, there's something you need to keep in mind. With VMFS 5, we did a lot of improvements, and largely around space utilization and performance optimization of the VMFS. So here you see a list. With 5, you get a single extent. You get a lot more files, unified block size, improved sub-block allocation. So it's a lot more efficient, a lot more performant. Okay, so yes, I'm going to want to upgrade my VMFS 3 to VMFS 5 because I want these benefits. Okay, the thing to keep in mind is if you upgrade from VMFS 3 to VMFS 5, it's only going to update the metadata. It's not going to go back and relay out the volume. So here's an example where you see a VMFS 5 volume that has been upgraded from VMFS 3 retains a lot of the VMFS 3 characteristics. So you're not going to get a lot of those VMFS 5 benefits. Yes, it will be VMFS 5, and it will be seen as VMFS 5, and be compatible with storage DRS and other things that require VMFS 5, but underlying architecture is going to be performing more to VMFS 3 level. So for that reason, if you have the luxury and you can do this, what's recommended is if you have VMFS 3 volumes and you're upgrading, if these are volumes out on shared storage where you're going to be running VMs and you're concerned about performance, you might be better suited to go out and create a brand new VMFS 5 volume, use storage vMotion to move the data over, and then blow away the VMFS 3. Okay. So what if I don't have storage vMotion? Remember, when you upgrade vCenter, you get a 60-day trial license. That gives you 60 days. So use that to your advantage. Use that 60 days to move that data over, and then when that 60 days is up, put your license on there, and then you go back. So you can kind of leverage that trial period to kind of help you make your upgrades a little easier and get data moved. And the same thing if you have VMs on local storage, you need to get those off on a shared storage, take that to your advantage. Okay, so that's just kind of a quick tip on VMFS. You also want to be aware of the virtual distributed switches. They're a little bit more straightforward. You simply go in, update your virtual distributed switch. I don't have any slides on that, but I do want to call it out because for folks out there who are going to the network sessions and going to the distributed switch sessions, you're finding out a lot of good information about new features and capabilities being added to the switch with 5.1 and 5.5. Well, if you've got a 5.0 and you've upgraded, but you haven't ever upgraded the switch, some of those features won't be available until you do that. So keep in mind, after you upgrade your ESXi host, there's VMs that need to be upgraded, there's tools, there's virtual hardware, there's VMFS volumes that need to be considered, and then there's distributed switches. So those are kind of the post-upgrade considerations. When you upgrade your VMFS volumes, just keep in mind that if that volume is mounted by a 4.x host, it will not let you do the upgrade. It will actually come up with a friendly little pop-up that says that, no 4.x host. So you have to make sure all your hosts have been upgraded to 5.5 or 5.0 or higher before you can upgrade that. Once you upgrade it, there's no undo. So once you upgrade it, you're VMFS 5. And So, and again, to fully benefit from the VMFS 5, just understand that, what the upgrade's entailing and the fact that, the legacy layout may not be as the same as if you created a fresh VMFS 5. So what that really means, if I'm looking at the boot disk and that boot disk has a VMFS volume on it and I'm storing some templates on there, upgrade it. I'm not really concerned about the layout of the VMFS volume on my boot disk. But if I got a SAN LUN out there where I've got a VMFS volume and I get some very high performant VMs on that, then I'm going to be concerned. So I don't want to really upgrade that one. I'm going to migrate. So not saying don't do the upgrade. I'm just saying be aware and make sure you address that. Okay, so key takeaways. So we just went through a lot of information. So let's kind of wrap it up here and then we'll do some Q&A. So understand the upgrade process. Have a plan. Don't just go in and say, today I'm going to upgrade vCenter, put blinders on, upgrade vCenter, and then find out that, oh, there were plugins that broke, or hey, I've got other things I should have considered. So have that plan in place. Understand how the software is packaged and distributed. Understand what's going on as far as what are we talking about when we say we're overlaying the host with VIBs. What are we saying what does it mean if I get a pop-up that says, hey, third-party software warning, there's going to be some VIBs removed when you do this upgrade. What does that mean? How do I get those VIBs back on the host? Should I use the image from my vendor or should I use the image from VMware? Have those answers. We've covered all that here. Understand patches versus updates versus upgrades. And that's really kind of just understand that process. Understand if you're not getting notification for patches, make sure you sign up, get that notification, stay current on your patches. Know the different upgrade methods. As Josh mentioned, they're all the same means, they're all common method to the same end, right? There's no one method's better than the other. A lot of it's maybe preference. I love Update Manager, I use it all the time, but I run into customers who use the installer. Which tool I use, whether I use the command line, Update Manager, installer, it's doing the same thing under the covers. It's the same process. It's just, how you get there. Stay current on your tools. Tools does a lot. Upgrade right away. Don't have to worry about any incompatibility because we support the newer version of tools on the older host. You have that forward, backwards compatibility. When it comes to VMware, the VM compatibility of virtual hardware, it's different. If you're running in a mixed cluster, don't upgrade your hardware until after all your hosts have been updated, because once you upgrade the virtual hardware or the VM compatibility, they can no longer run on an older host. So he brought up the example of doing a vMotion, but also consider this. If I have a 16-host cluster, I've got 8 hosts running 5.5 and 8 hosts running 4.1, and I go in and create a new VM, and I create that VM with the compatibility 5.5, and then that host has a failure and HA restarts it. HA is not going to be able to restart it on a 4X host, and I could be eating some downtime. So to help with that, in the web client, it actually allows you to define a default compatibility level so that anybody creates a new VM, it will default to say compatibility 5.0 or compatibility 4. So keep that in mind. And then finally, remember post-upgrade considerations. You remember VDS, remember your VMFS volumes. And really the key message here is upgrading vSphere. vSphere is a suite. There's a lot of pieces to it. Don't go in silos and try and tackle the pieces. Look at the big picture, plan it out, and then you're going to have more success in your upgrades. And so with that, we'll open it up to questions. There's 2 microphones here. They are recording, so we're going to ask you to please use the microphone so the questions get heard in the recording as well. And we'll be happy to take any questions. Looks like we got just a little under 10 minutes, so we got a few minutes.
Yeah, so we have time. Bueller? No questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so in my environment, we have multiple vCenters, and some of which are linked. Is there anything on the roadmap to be able to use the vSphere Update Manager with more than one vCenter?
Yes, it's on the roadmap. I can't really tell you much more than that.
Okay.
Yeah, we do realize that that's an issue, and that is something that's on the roadmap and being looked at, and we're engineer and PM's working on it.
Okay. Is there any possible recommendations for being able to export some of the baselines or any of the information related to that from one to another? Is there any way you can do that, or is it really just...
So the question is there any way to basically go and export some of the baselines of stuff and import between?
I'm not
sure.
I'm sure you can with Power CLI.
Yeah, maybe with some of the Power CLI plugins and stuff, you might be able to.
Okay,
but,
thank you.
Yeah. All right, next question. I guess if we go back to this mic over here, go ahead.
My question has to do with the hardware upgrade on the virtual machines. I seem to, I don't know if it's just me, but after performing that particular step, when powering the VM back on, get prompted with the question of whether it was a VM that was copied or moved. The question is why is that coming up when that process is completed? And of course, I've made the mistake of following that context and saying if you don't know, pick copy. when it should say if you don't know, refer to documentation so you don't make a mess of something.
So you're saying that happens when you do the hardware upgrade?
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
when you move it?
Right. After you do the hardware upgrade, then you power the VM back on. It'll come up in an alarm state and say, was this VM copied or moved?
And you're seeing that consistently every time?
Yeah. And I had that happen on more than one upgrade occurrence.
But it happens once per VM, but it happens on every VM.
Correct.
Because
I don't know why it would happen in that situation. That's different. Let's take it offline.
Yeah,
I'll give you a card.
Yeah, come up here and get a card stuff. But that question usually comes up when you change, when it's basically seen as like a new VM that you've imported from another environment. It's basically saying, hey, do I need to get a new UUID or can I use the old one? Should I copy? And so when you're upgrading the hardware, that's kind of surprising that you would be getting that question. Okay, over here.
If you create a new VMS5 LUN, can a 4X host access a new LUN?
No, 4.x host cannot mount VMFS 5. So yeah, you'll need to upgrade all your hosts before you do that. Go ahead.
Kind of revisiting the first question, it seems like there is functionality in the vCenter client to use a single repository for upgrade repository for multiple vCenters. There's a place where you can go in and insert a URL to try and point to another repository, but I've never been able to get that to work. Is that functionality intended to be there, and can you provide any guidance on making that work?
In the web client, you're saying?
Well, actually, I'm using the desktop client for that.
Yeah, I didn't think that was in the web.
So you're talking about with Update Manager and the download repositories and the links where you get the updates?
Yeah, in the Update Manager UI, portion of the UI, there is a place where you can say, enter a URL for your repository. So if I've got two vCenters and I've configured one Update Manager, can I take the second one and point it to that Update Manager?
I see what you're saying. No, let me make sure I'm correct in this. I believe there's a one-to-one relationship.
Yeah, there's a one-to-one between Update Manager and vCenter.
So I guess my question is, what's the purpose of being able to specify that URL and the UI?
So I think what that URL is, if I'm understanding right, is some people are in secure environments, they don't have access to the internet, so what they'll do is they'll download the patches to a host that's in the DMZ, then they'll copy them over, then they'll tell Update Manager to go there. So rather than just have Update Manager go out and get the patches from the hosts that are out there on the internet, you can specify the own web server where to get updates.
Okay, but I could do that for two vCenters and point them both to the same repository.
Yeah, you can have two different VMs pointing to that repository and pulling from that repository.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, so and you also have the Update Manager download service that you would install on the host to help facilitate that as well.
Thank you.
All right.
We recently updated some of our hosts from 4.x to 5.1 and had some of our VMs automatically install tools and reboot, which caused some problems. So what did I do wrong there? We've got a few more we need to do, and there are machines that shouldn't go down. And
did you use Update Manager?
No, actually. We just did it, the ISO mounted to the host and did an upgrade that way.
So you're basically saying that they did an upgrade from 4.1 to 5.1 and it automatically upgraded tools and rebooted their VMs.
That's configurable.
I guess then I need to know.
There's a configuration center to automatically update tools or something. So what will happen when the VM boots up, it looks at the host. If there's a newer version of tools, it will go ahead and do that automatic upgrade. That's an option you've got enabled somewhere.
So I got to find that.
All right.
Cool. Sorry, I had a hard time hearing you with the echo.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I had kind of a follow-up on that. I thought I remember seeing something not too long ago on the web that talked about you guys were working on a new tools package that would not require a reboot, but earlier you said that tools will require a reboot.
Yeah, let me give you a little history. So last year at VMworld, I stood up here and said, hey, one of the new features in 5.1 is you'll be able to upgrade tools with no downtime. Yeah. And then I was corrected. So what it is we took, so in the Windows 2008, 2012, they have a capability now to be able to do some hot swapping of some kernel modules and stuff. stuff and they don't require a reboot. And we updated our tools to kind of help leverage that with the idea that going forward, we'd be able to throw tools in there without requiring a reboot. The problem is that there's certain modules that always require a reboot, and those modules happen to always be included in every tools update, things like keyboard and mouse and USB. So even though that capability is there and we can technically do it, we always provide those modules that require the reboot, so we're always going to require a reboot.
So a tools patch might not, but version upgrades most likely
potentially.
will.
And
Okay.
you know, and going forward, I know there's still some work to be done there. You know, the idea that depending on, you know, like on Linux, you can stage the patch and reboot later versus Windows reboot right away. So yeah, so that was something that the plumbing's kind of started out in 5.1. Some of the plumbing's there. We still got some things to work on, and so we still need to work on that to truly get to a true upgrade with no reboot.
Okay, I got one more quick one for you.
Okay.
So when you talk about the rolling upgrade of the VMFSs, being able to bring on a new LUN or data store and then vMotion things off, if you have an empty data store, is there a command somewhere in there to reformat that from scratch so that you don't have to blow it away and recreate a new one? You could then take it down to bare metal and bring it back up so it comes up with unified block and all the new features?
I don't know if you could use the VMKFS. You have an existing VMFS3, you want to just reformat it as opposed to have to delete it, recreate it. Just reformat it as VMFS5. You can use VMKFS tools to do that.
Oh, VMK.
You might be able to use VMKFS tools.
Yeah, I mean, it saved the SAN guys a lot of headache, I'm sure.
Yeah, so, but yeah, I'm not aware. I just go and delete it and then just recreate the LUN.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Yeah.
Kelly.
I guess we're out of time. So for the other guys, we'll kind of congregate over here, so we'll be happy to answer your questions. Just kind of follow us over here.
Yeah,
go
definitely.
ahead.
Okay.